Jin-Woo Park stood before the mirror in the courthouse bathroom, adjusting his dark blue tie. His reflection showed a young lawyer in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly pressed suit. He had graduated at the top of his class from Seoul National University's law school, but some people still only saw the color of his skin. Today was important. He had to defend a small business owner against a large corporation. The case would be heard by Judge Do-hyun Kim, known for his tough decisions and old-fashioned views. Jin-Woo had appeared in Judge Kim's courtroom 5 times before, and each time had been harder than the last. "You've got this," Jin-Woo whispered to himself. He picked up his briefcase and walked to courtroom 3. Hae-Yun Lee, his paralegal, waited outside with a stack of papers. She was short, efficient, and one of the few people who treated Jin-Woo with complete respect from day one. "I double-checked everything," she said, handing him a folder. "The evidence is solid. Even Judge Kim can't ignore it." Jin-Woo smiled. "Thanks, Hae-Yun. Let's hope you're right." They entered the courtroom together. The opposing lawyer, Mr. Yang, was already there, talking quietly with Judge Kim. They both looked up when Jin-Woo entered, and Jin-Woo noticed the slight frown that crossed Judge Kim's face. Judge Kim was in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes behind his glasses. He sat straight in his chair like he was ready to find fault with everything Jin-Woo would say. "All rise," the court officer announced as the proceedings began officially. Case number 2025 CR 789, Lee's Family Restaurant versus Golden Tower Development. Judge Kim said, his voice carrying across the quiet courtroom. He looked at Jin-Woo with cold eyes. "Mr. Park, you may present your opening statement." Jin-Woo stood up slowly. He had prepared for hours, practicing every word. "Your Honor, this case is about justice for small business owners. My client, Mrs. Lee, has run her restaurant for 20 years. Golden Tower Development wants to break their contract and force her out 2 years early, just because they found a bigger client." Judge Kim interrupted immediately. "Mr. Park, stick to the facts. We don't need emotional appeals." Jin-Woo noticed Mr. Yang smirking. He took a deep breath and continued. "The facts, Your Honor, are clear. We have a signed contract that runs until 2027. We have written promises from Golden Tower Development confirming this timeline. We have proof that they're trying to break this contract only because a large chain restaurant offered them more money." As Jin-Woo spoke, Hae-Yun quietly arranged documents on their table. They had prepared everything perfectly, but Judge Kim kept interrupting with small complaints. "Mr. Park, speak up. Mr. Park, move closer to the microphone. Mr. Park, we don't have all day." Each interruption was designed to throw Jin-Woo off balance, but he stayed focused. He had dealt with this kind of treatment since law school. It only made him work harder. When Jin-Woo presented their first piece of evidence, an email from Golden Tower's management, Judge Kim frowned. "This email could be interpreted in many ways, Mr. Park. Do you have anything more concrete?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jin-Woo replied calmly. He pulled out another document. "We have the original contract, signed and notarized. Section 7.3 clearly states that the lease cannot be terminated early unless both parties agree in writing." Hae-Yun handed copies to the court clerk. Judge Kim barely glanced at the document before speaking. "Mr. Yang, your response." Mr. Yang stood up with a confident smile. "Your Honor, while the contract exists, our interpretation suggests that Section 7.3 doesn't apply in cases of property redevelopment. We have precedent from similar cases." "Excellent point." Judge Kim nodded, even though Mr. Yang hadn't finished his argument. Jin-Woo stood up. "Your Honor, I object. The precedents Mr. Yang refers to dealt with different circumstances. In those cases, the buildings needed urgent repairs. That's not true here. We have recent inspection reports showing the building is in perfect condition." Judge Kim waved his hand dismissively. "Objection noted, Mr. Park, but I'll allow Mr. Yang to continue." The pattern continued throughout the morning. Every time Jin Woo made a strong point, Judge Kim would find a way to minimize it. When Mr. Yang spoke, even his weakest arguments received favorable attention. During a short break, Hye-yeon approached Jin Woo. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Judge Kim isn't even trying to hide his bias." Jin Woo took a sip of water. "It's okay. We just need to be better prepared. Can you check if we have the building inspection reports from the last 5 years? I want to show a pattern." Hye-yeon nodded and hurried off. Jin Woo noticed Mrs. Lee, his client, sitting nervously in the gallery. She was a kind woman who had served him the best kimchi stew he'd ever tasted. Her restaurant was her life's work, and he couldn't let her down. When court resumed, Jin Woo presented the inspection reports. They clearly showed the building was well maintained. He also had testimonies from other tenants supporting Mrs. Lee's case. "Your Honor," Jin Woo said, his voice steady, "these documents prove that Golden Tower's claims about needing redevelopment are false. They simply want to break a legal contract for profit." Judge Kim adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Park, you're making serious accusations against a respected company. Do you have any direct evidence of their motives?" Jin Woo had been waiting for this moment. He pulled out his final piece of evidence, an internal memo from Golden Tower discussing the potential profits from replacing Mrs. Lee's restaurant with a chain restaurant. "This memo, Your Honor, clearly shows their true intentions. They admit the building doesn't need renovation. They just want to increase their profits by forcing out a successful small business." Judge Kim's face darkened. "Mr. Park, I'll need time to review all this evidence. Court will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. He stood up abruptly and left the courtroom. As people began filing out, Mr. Yang approached Jin Woo. "Nice try, Park," he said with a smirk. "But you know how this will end. Judge Kim has never ruled against Golden Tower." Jin Woo gathered his papers calmly. "There's a first time for everything, Mr. Yang." After everyone left, Hye-yeon stayed behind to help Jin Woo pack up. "You did great today," she said. "Judge Kim's bias was obvious to everyone. If he rules against us, we can appeal." Jin Woo nodded, but his mind was already working on tomorrow's strategy. He had faced prejudice before, but he had never let it stop him. Each challenge only made him more determined to succeed. That evening, instead of going home, Jin Woo stayed at his office. He reviewed every detail of the case, looking for anything that could help. Around midnight, Hye-yeon brought him coffee. "I found something interesting," she said, placing a news article on his desk. "Golden Tower tried this same tactic 5 years ago with a different tenant. The case was settled quietly, but I bet we can find more details." Jin Woo smiled tiredly. "Good work. Let's dig deeper. Judge Kim might be biased, but even he can't ignore clear evidence of a pattern." As they worked through the night, Jin Woo thought about his journey to this moment. His parents had moved to Korea when he was young, dreaming of better opportunities. They had faced countless challenges, but never gave up. Now, their son was a lawyer, fighting for justice in one of Seoul's biggest courts. Tomorrow would be another battle, but Jin Woo was ready. Judge Kim's prejudice was just another obstacle to overcome. In his heart, Jin Woo knew that truth and justice would eventually win, no matter how long it took. The city lights twinkled outside his office window as he prepared for the next day. Sometimes, the hardest challenges led to the most unexpected opportunities. Jin Woo didn't know it yet, but this case would change his life in ways he could never imagine. The morning sun had barely risen when Jin Woo arrived at the courthouse for the second day of the trial. He carried 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for Hye-yeon. They had worked until 3 a.m., uncovering more evidence about Golden Tower's past dealings. Hye-yeon waited at their usual spot, already reviewing documents. Her eyes lit up at the sight of coffee. "Thank you. I found something big last night after you left." She pulled out a newspaper article from 6 months ago. It announced that Star Law Group one of the biggest law firms in Seoul, was looking to merge with smaller firms. Judge Kim's private law firm was on their list of potential partners. "This is interesting," Jin-woo said, reading the article carefully. "But how does it help our case?" Hae-yun smiled. "Keep reading." Star Law Group's CEO, Mi-sun Choi, has a strong stance against discrimination. She's known for choosing partners based on their ethical practices. Before Jin-woo could respond, the courthouse doors opened. They hurried inside, where Mr. Yang was already setting up his materials. Judge Kim entered shortly after, looking more irritated than usual. "Yesterday's evidence requires further review," Judge Kim announced. "We'll proceed with witness testimony today." Jin-woo called his first witness, Mr. Song, an elderly man who owned the bookstore next to Mrs. Lee's restaurant. Mr. Song had been in the building for 25 years. "Mrs. Lee's restaurant brings many customers to our building," Mr. Song testified. "The food is excellent, and she keeps her space very clean. There's no need for renovation here." Judge Kim interrupted. "Mr. Park, this testimony seems irrelevant. The witness isn't a building expert." "Your Honor," Jin-woo replied calmly, "Mr. Song's testimony establishes the building's good condition and the harm that forced relocation would cause to all tenants." Throughout the morning, Jin-woo presented more witnesses. Each one supported Mrs. Lee's case, but Judge Kim found ways to question their credibility. During lunch break, Jin-woo noticed several people in business suits watching the proceedings with great interest. Hae-yun nudged him. "Those people are from Star Law Group. I recognize Mi-sun Choi from her photos." Jin-woo tried to focus on the case, but he couldn't help wondering why such important people were watching this trial. He returned to the courtroom determined to prove his skills. The afternoon session began with Golden Tower's witnesses. Their building manager claimed the renovation was necessary, but under Jin-woo's questioning, he couldn't explain why. "Sir," Jin-woo asked, "can you show us any engineering reports that recommend these renovations?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. "Well, no, but, and isn't it true that your company only started talking about renovations after Spring Garden restaurant chain offered to pay triple the current rent?" Judge Kim banged his gavel. "Mr. Park, stick to relevant questions." "Your Honor, this is relevant. It shows the real reason behind Golden Tower's actions." Jin-woo noticed Mi-sun Choi taking notes. She seemed particularly interested whenever Judge Kim interrupted him unfairly. During the afternoon break, Hae-yun rushed to Jin-woo with more news. "I just overheard something important. Star Law Group isn't just looking for partner firms. They're searching for new leadership." Jin-woo was about to reply when his phone buzzed with an email. He read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. Star Law Group wanted to meet with him tomorrow morning. "This is strange," he muttered. "Why would they want to meet me?" Hae-yun grinned. "Maybe they've noticed how well you handle difficult situations." When court resumed, Mr. Yang presented Golden Tower's final witness, their financial director. The man talked about profit projections and market rates, trying to justify breaking Mrs. Lee's contract. Jin-woo stood for cross-examination. "Sir, in these projections, did you consider the impact on small business owners who built their lives around this location?" "Objection," Mr. Yang called out. "Emotional appeal." "Sustained," Judge Kim said quickly. "Mr. Park, please maintain professional distance." Jin-woo adjusted his approach. "Let me rephrase. Did your company consider the legal costs of breaking multiple long-term contracts?" The financial director hesitated. "Well, we assumed most tenants would leave quietly, like the tenant from 5 years ago, the one who settled out of court after your company used similar tactics." The courtroom grew very quiet. Judge Kim looked surprised. He hadn't known about the previous case. Neither had Mr. Yang, judging by his expression. "Your Honor," Jin-woo continued, "I'd like to submit evidence of Golden Tower's previous attempts to forcibly remove tenants. It shows a pattern of behavior." Judge Kim had no choice but to accept the evidence. "Court will recess until tomorrow while I review these documents." As people left the courtroom, Jin-woo noticed Mai Sun-choi watching him with approval. She nodded slightly before leaving with her team. That evening, in his office, Jin-woo prepared for both the next day's trial and his mysterious meeting with Star Law Group. Hae-yeon stayed late again, helping him organize the case files. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "you've already proven yourself. Everyone can see Judge Kim's bias, and you're still winning on the facts." Jin-woo smiled tiredly. "Thanks, Hae-yeon. I just hope it's enough to save Mrs. Lee's restaurant." Later that night, as Jin-woo drove home, he thought about how strange life could be. He had faced discrimination all his life, but it had made him stronger, more determined. Now, somehow, his struggle against prejudice might lead to an unexpected opportunity. His phone buzzed again. Another email from Star Law Group confirming tomorrow's meeting. The subject line read, "Discussing your future." Jin-woo parked outside his apartment building and looked up at the stars. His parents had always told him that hard work and integrity would open doors. Maybe they were right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in a while, he felt truly hopeful. In his apartment, he laid out his best suit for tomorrow. The meeting with Star Law Group was scheduled for 7 a.m., 2 hours before court would resume. Something big was about to happen, and Jin-woo needed to be ready. He fell asleep thinking about justice, about change, and about the look on Judge Kim's face when he'd revealed the evidence about Golden Tower's past. Sometimes fighting against prejudice meant more than just winning a single case. Sometimes it meant changing the whole system, one small victory at a time. Jin-woo arrived at Star Law Group's office building at 6:45 a.m. The modern glass tower reflected the morning sun, making it shine like gold. Inside the lobby, a receptionist guided him to the top floor. Mai Sun-choi's office had a view of the entire city. She stood near the window, a tall woman in her 50s with a kind smile but sharp eyes. 2 other people sat at a large table, the company's board members. "Mr. Park," Mai Sun said, "thank you for coming so early. We've been watching your work closely." Jin-woo sat down, curious but nervous. "I'm honored, but I don't understand why I'm here." Mai Sun smiled. "Let me be direct. We're not just merging with smaller firms. We're looking for someone to lead our new combined organization. Someone who shows integrity, skill, and courage in difficult situations." Jin-woo's heart beat faster as he understood what she meant. "You're considering me for a leadership position." "More than considering," one of the board members said. "We've watched how you handle Judge Kim's obvious bias. Instead of getting angry or giving up, you work harder. You stay professional. That's exactly what we need." Mai Sun handed Jin-woo a folder. "This is our offer. We want you as managing partner of the merged firm. You would oversee all operations, including our current merger plans." Jin-woo opened the folder. The salary number made his eyes widen, but something else caught his attention. "This says Judge Kim's firm is one of the merger targets." "Yes," Mai Sun nodded. "And that's where it gets interesting. Judge Kim plans to return to private practice next month. If you accept our offer, you would be his direct superior." Jin-woo sat quietly, thinking about what this meant. The same judge who had discriminated against him would soon work under his leadership. Life could be surprisingly fair sometimes. "I need some time to think about this," Jin-woo said carefully. "Of course," Mai Sun replied. "But there's something else you should know. The Judicial Review Board is investigating Judge Kim's conduct. Several lawyers have filed complaints about his bias. They'd been watching your current case closely." When Jin-woo left the meeting, his mind was spinning. He had 24 hours to decide about the job offer. First, though, he had to finish the current trial. Hae-yeon waited outside the courthouse with fresh coffee. "How did the meeting go?" Jin-woo told her everything. Her eyes got bigger and bigger as he explained. "This is amazing," she exclaimed. "It's perfect justice. Judge Kim's prejudice against you will end up putting you in charge of his career." Inside the courtroom, Jinwoo noticed several new faces. The Judicial Review Board members sat in the back, watching carefully. Judge Kim looked nervous when he saw them. "Before we continue," Judge Kim announced, "I have reviewed yesterday's evidence. Mr. Park, your points about Golden Tower's past actions are concerning." For the first time, Judge Kim spoke to Jinwoo with respect. Maybe he had finally realized his mistakes, or maybe he had heard about the investigation into his conduct. Mr. Yang tried to defend Golden Tower, but his arguments seemed weak now. The evidence of their pattern of forcing out small business owners was too clear. During the lunch break, Jinwoo visited Mrs. Lee's restaurant. The small place was full of customers enjoying her famous kimchi stew. "How is the case going?" she asked, bringing him an extra large portion. "Very well," Jinwoo smiled. "I think we're going to win." Back in court, Jinwoo presented his closing argument. He spoke about justice, about keeping promises, and about protecting small business owners who worked hard to build their dreams. "Your Honor," he concluded, "this case is simple. We have a valid contract. We have proof that Golden Tower's renovation claims are false, and we have evidence of their real motives. The law is clear. Mrs. Lee has the right to stay until their contract ends." Judge Kim looked at the Judicial Review Board members, then at Jinwoo. "I will announce my decision tomorrow morning." That evening, Jinwoo sat in his office with Hye-yun, discussing the Star Law Group offer. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Jinwoo looked at the city lights outside his window. "If I take this job, I could make real changes, stop discrimination, help other people who face prejudice. But it's a big responsibility." "You can handle it," Hye-yun said confidently. "You've proven that every day in court." Late that night, Jinwoo called his parents. He told them about the job offer and the case. "We're so proud of you," his mother said, her voice full of emotion. "You've worked so hard for this." The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Everyone wanted to hear Judge Kim's decision. My son Choi sat in the front row with her team. Judge Kim entered, looking more humble than usual. He adjusted his glasses and began to speak. "After careful consideration of all evidence, I find in favor of the defendant, Mrs. Lee. Golden Tower Development must honor the existing contract until its natural end in 2027. Furthermore, they must pay Mrs. Lee's legal fees and provide written assurance that they will not attempt to terminate her lease early." The courtroom erupted in applause. Mrs. Lee hugged Jinwoo, crying happy tears. Hye-yun gave him a thumbs up. After court adjourned, Judge Kim approached Jinwoo. "Mr. Park, I owe you an apology. My conduct during this trial was inappropriate. I let personal bias affect my judgment. It won't happen again." Jinwoo nodded politely. "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your honesty." As Judge Kim walked away, my son Choi came over. "Have you made your decision about our offer?" Jinwoo looked at Hye-yun, who smiled encouragingly. He thought about all the other young lawyers who faced discrimination, about how he could help change things from a position of leadership. "Yes," he said firmly, "I accept." My son smiled. "Excellent. We'll announce the merger next week. And Jinwoo, Judge Kim doesn't know about your new position yet. That will be an interesting conversation." That afternoon, Jinwoo treated his whole team to lunch at Mrs. Lee's restaurant. As they celebrated their victory, he thought about how much his life had changed in just a few days. Sometimes justice came in unexpected ways. His fight against prejudice had not only won the case, but had also opened a door to something bigger. Now he would have the power to make real changes in the legal world. As he looked around at his happy colleagues, Jinwoo felt ready for his new role. The young lawyer who had faced discrimination was about to become one of the most powerful legal executives in Seoul. Life had come full circle, and he was ready to make the most of this opportunity. 1 month after the trial, Jinwoo stood in his new office at Star Law Group. The room was larger than his old apartment, with windows stretching from floor to ceiling. The city spread out below like a giant puzzle, reminding him of how all the pieces of his life had come together in unexpected ways. Hye-yun knocked on his door, carrying a stack of papers. As the new head of legal research, she had her own team now, but she still liked to bring important documents to Jin-woo personally. "The merger announcement goes public today," she said, placing the papers on his desk. "And Judge Kim returns to private practice next week." Jin-woo nodded, remembering how much had changed. The news of his appointment as managing partner had surprised many people. Some older lawyers couldn't believe a young man who had faced such discrimination would now lead one of Korea's biggest law firms. My son Choi had handled the announcement perfectly. At the press conference, she had said, "Jin-woo Park represents everything our company believes in: excellence, integrity, and the courage to fight for what's right. His background and experiences will help us build a better future for the legal profession." Today would bring another big moment. Judge Kim would learn who his new boss would be. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. Jin-woo arrived early and sat at the head of the table. Hye-yun arranged his papers, then took her place nearby. Other lawyers filtered in, including the heads of the merged firms. At exactly 10 a.m., Judge Kim walked in. He had changed from his judicial robes to a business suit, but he still carried himself like someone used to being in charge. Then Judge Kim saw Jin-woo sitting at the head of the table. His face went pale. "Good morning, everyone," Jin-woo said calmly. "Welcome to our first full partner meeting. For those who don't know me, I'm Jin-woo Park, managing partner of Star Law Group." Judge Kim sat down slowly, looking shocked. Jin-woo continued the meeting as planned, discussing the firm's new direction. He outlined policies promoting diversity and equal treatment for all employees and clients. "Our firm will lead by example," Jin-woo explained. "We will show that success comes from giving everyone a fair chance, from judging people by their abilities, not their appearance." Throughout the meeting, Judge Kim stayed quiet. Jin-woo could see him struggling with this new reality. The young lawyer he had discriminated against was now his boss. After the meeting, Judge Kim stayed behind. He looked older and tired. "Mr. Park," he said quietly, "I suppose you'll want my resignation." Jin-woo studied the man who had once made his life difficult. "Actually, no. I believe people can change, Judge Kim. I've seen it happen. What I want is your help." Judge Kim looked confused. "My help? Yes. You've experienced both sides now. Being in power and suddenly finding yourself judged unfairly. That's valuable perspective. I want you to help me create new training programs for our lawyers. Programs that teach them to recognize and overcome their biases." "You're not going to punish me?" Judge Kim asked. Jin-woo smiled. "Punishment doesn't change people, Judge Kim. Understanding does. You're a good lawyer. Use your experience to help others learn from your mistakes." Tears appeared in Judge Kim's eyes. "I don't deserve this chance. Everyone deserves a chance to be better," Jin-woo said firmly. "That's what I believe. That's what this firm will stand for." Over the next few months, Jin-woo's leadership brought big changes to Star Law Group. The firm became known for taking cases that helped small business owners and people facing discrimination. They hired young lawyers from diverse backgrounds, giving them chances that other firms wouldn't. Judge Kim surprised everyone by becoming one of the strongest supporters of these changes. He spoke openly about his past prejudices and worked hard to help others overcome their biases. His training programs became a model for other law firms. 6 months after becoming managing partner, Jin-woo visited Mrs. Lee's restaurant. It was busier than ever. The victory against Golden Tower had made her famous, and people came from all over Seoul to try her food. "I kept your regular table free," Mrs. Lee said, leading him to his spot. "Will Hye-yun join you today?" "Yes, and I invited 2 other people, Judge Kim and my son Choi. We're celebrating something special." When everyone arrived, Mrs. Lee served her famous kimchi stew. As they ate, Jinwoo shared the news. Star Law Group had just won a major case protecting small business owners across the city. The judgment would make it harder for big companies to break contracts with their tenants. "None of this would have happened without you, Mrs. Lee," Jinwoo said. "Your case started everything." Judge Kim nodded. "It showed me how wrong I was, how my prejudices hurt people and blocked justice." My son smiled. "And it showed us exactly who should lead our firm into the future." Hye-yun raised her glass. "To justice and change." Later that evening, Jinwoo stood in his office, watching the city lights come on. He thought about his journey, from a young lawyer facing discrimination to becoming a leader who could help others. The path hadn't been easy, but every challenge had made him stronger. His phone buzzed with a message from his parents. They were sending him a newspaper article about Star Law Group's latest victory. "So proud of you," his mother wrote. "You're changing things for the better." Jinwoo smiled. Real change happened slowly, one person at a time. Judge Kim had learned to see past his prejudices. Other lawyers were learning too. Most importantly, young people facing discrimination could now look at Star Law Group and see hope for their own futures. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Jinwoo was ready for them. He had learned that justice could work in surprising ways. Sometimes the best revenge against prejudice wasn't punishment, but the chance to help others build a better world. As he prepared to leave for the day, he saw Judge Kim working late in his office, helping a young lawyer with a pro bono case. They were defending another small business owner facing discrimination. Life had come full circle, but the circle kept growing larger, touching more lives, creating more chances for justice. That was the real victory, not just winning his own battles, but helping others win theirs too. Jinwoo picked up his briefcase and headed home, feeling grateful for everything that had happened. Sometimes the hardest challenges led to the most important changes. His story wasn't just about overcoming discrimination. It was about transforming it into something positive that could help others. And that, he realized, was the greatest justice of all.